everyone. This is Deep Dive, episode 3, and today I'd like to talk to you about softer dynamics. People often focus on big moments in performances, but I think it's so important to really play the quiet moments well, and the pianists I admire seem to have 1,000 different shades of quiet when they perform. In many ways, it's much harder to play soft than loud. When you play loud, you are really letting go of that energy and putting in all your strength into the piano. But when you play soft, there's a lot that goes on between the time you raise your hand and the time that the sound actually comes out. It's a very slow movement, and because we have to really perform on different instruments with different kinds of touch with each concert, it's very hard to get that specific sound when we're in a softer dynamic or piano or pianissimo. So today I'd like to explore different ways in which I approach a piano sound when I see the word piano or pianissimo in the score. As the first example, I'd like to discuss what happens in the very beginning of the second movement of Grieg's Piano Concerto. In the left hand, you have a beautiful sweep in D flat. This sort of repeats itself while the right hand plays this melody. The two hands are both in mezzo piano, same dynamic, but I think the way I play them is totally different. The left hand, you really want to get that plush, almost cushion-like sound, that envelope the right hand, but not get in the way. It's sort of in the background. It gives you that beautiful chordal structure in the back, whereas the right hand is an object that's in the forefront and should really sing, maybe even shimmer a little bit. So left hand, it's almost like scooping something, like scooping some very creamy dessert. My whole arm has to be in one motion, and I have to practice it so not one note sticks out. Everything has to be so smooth and has to be done in one motion. Very little weight involved. Maybe in the very first note, establish the D flat, and then with each note, the weight gets less, because with the pedal, if it doesn't get less, you'll get a big crescendo, and that's we don't want that. In the right hand, I think it's very important to note how heavy my hand is. I think if you were to put your hand on my elbow, my entire elbow would be quite heavy when I play this passage. When I play this first note, I have to almost pretend like piano is much deeper than it is, that each key is not this deep, but it just goes much deeper. And to demonstrate, I have my little friend here. Very often I see people sort of just striking the key maybe because it's piano, strike it very slowly, but their motion just sort of would end here. Whereas you really need to go as deep and as heavy as you can. Something like that, almost like a deep tissue massage of the piano. You know, it really does help to create this weight onto the note, even after you strike the note, it does something to the quality of the sound, because when you do that movement, your ears are listening to what's happening after you strike the note and keeping that tension in your system and going linking it in your mind, creating this lyricism to the phrase. Of course, the note, as soon as you strike the note, it gets softer on the piano. But you almost have to imagine as if it's sustaining or getting louder toward that next note, so you don't lose that energy within your system in between notes. This kind of melody, I think you really need to pretend like you're a singer or a string player, and you can really vibrate and really hang in there really physically with your hands and your weight and your arms to sing the best you can. Next example, I'd like to talk to you about a completely different kind of piano. This is from Pagodas by Debussy. In this passage, the weight distribution is very different because instead of going down or scooping up, it takes a completely different kind of technique where I think of a very still pond, and you're simply touching the surface of the pond and imagining the ripples sort of happen in the way that you have always imagined. Here we have this passage. And then piece goes on like this. This beginning, I think, has to set just the right mood for the rest of the piece. And I really think of these Asian hilltops, these pagodas, when I begin this piece. So we have 3 levels. 1, 2, 3, only to come back. And you would play them very differently from the Grieg piano concerto. This kind of piano is achieved by resting your hand on the keyboard and very slowly moving in and depressing the keys. You should really feel that the surface of the piano with your fingertips. And you should only strike it not down, but in a diagonal. Maybe that could have a little bit of light, so you can pinch it a little bit more, but these experiment with them, so you get this almost a hollow sound, but a very round, weightless sound. It's almost a misty quality to this kind of piano when you don't go down but sort of come up on a diagonal. So that's another way you can experiment with creating a different kind of piano sound. I'd like to explore 2 other passages, very contrasting in character from the ones before, because these are very virtuosic and fast passages. Let's go back to Rachmaninoff's Rhapsody on the Theme by Paganini from Deep Dive 1. So this section is written in piano, which is really hard to do because you have all these jumps and you're worried about accuracy. And it's much easier to play this loud because of all this distance, and you would strike it with everything you got, which usually results in a very loud sound. So in order to restrain yourself from that dynamic, it takes that extra control. So how do I practice this? I have to get to the notes before I strike it. It's so fast that you might get there maybe just a millisecond before you strike it, but it makes all the difference, because if you strike it from the air, I mean, it's kind of a scary thing to do because you might land elsewhere and miss the notes, but most likely you will make a big sound. So you have to get there before. So the movement is not down, but your hand is already resting on it and it's up. You can really control a soft sound when the movement is up, not down. So in that same way, for the second movement, the end of second movement of Prokofiev's third piano concerto, he writes this. And this is written in pianissimo. It's even worse. And it's very difficult to do because you can't feel your arms at all by this point in the piece. But there's so many notes. You're striking 6 notes at a time, and they're always changing. And because of the speed, you start, if you're not ready, you start going like this, rather than. And how you get that uniform, quiet sound is if you strike the chord, go to the next one. So you spend no time in air getting to the next note. So that momentum is never there. You're moving as quickly as possible, playing. So in slow motion, it would look like that, not just up and down continually. So doing that really improves the accuracy, and you're actually able to play a softer dynamic because it's easy to control it once you're already at the note. So these are just a few different ways I would approach a phrase or a section that has the dynamic piano, pianissimo, mezzo piano. Hope it was helpful to you, and hope you go out there and really discover new colors in these softer dynamics. See you next week in Deep Dive 4, where I will explore the fortes. So have a great week. See you then. Bye.